Chapter 1, Death's Bargain. Synopsis: Death's Bargain. Morgan Lancaster had it all: wealth, power, and a beautiful wife named Jenny. But the moment he hung up on her desperate call for help, everything unraveled. She died by suicide, and the world turned against him. Haunted by guilt and crushed by grief, Morgan lost his empire and spiraled into ruin, wishing for one impossible thing: a second chance. And the universe answered. In the hospital, as Jenny's body teetered between life and death, a restless spirit named Mandy struck a deal with death. Killed in a car accident and desperate to live again, Mandy offered to take Jenny's place, her body, her memories, and her unborn child, in exchange for one more shot at life. Jenny agreed. Moments before Morgan could lose her again, the timeline resets. He wakes up in his old life, on the very day Jenny overdosed. But Jenny is no longer the same woman. Inside her body now lives Mandy, bearing the weight of Jenny's memories, grief, and shattered past. As Morgan races to rewrite fate and prove his love, Mandy must navigate a life that isn't hers, a husband who doesn't know the truth, and a powerful family full of secrets. What would you sacrifice for a second chance? And what if the woman you're trying to save isn't the same soul anymore? If I could undo a single moment in my life, it would be that phone call. I still remember her voice, quiet, soft, like she was afraid to speak too loud or it might break her completely. Morgan. I'm having bad thoughts. Can you come home? My hand was already on the doorknob of the boardroom. I was late. Investors were waiting. The Collin Corporation had been under fire that entire week, and we were bleeding influence. I will, sweetheart. Right after this meeting, okay? I gotta go. We'll talk later when I get home. She hesitated. I heard it. That tiny pause, like she wanted to say more. But I hung up. God, I hung up. The meeting was a blur. I don't remember the charts, or the angry shareholders, or the assistant trying to whisper numbers in my ear. I just remember Jake's voice afterward. Panicked. Hollow. She's at the hospital. It's Jenny. She didn't make it. Overdose, they said. Sleeping pills and something else. She died curled up in our bathroom, next to the sweater I left on the floor. I wasn't even there. I was supposed to protect her. I was her husband. And I left her alone. Everything crumbled after that. Her board turned on me within weeks, tore the Collin Corporation from my hands like wolves with blood on their teeth. My own business followed. Investors fled. The press branded me as the man who married the nation's princess and let her die. They were right. The vultures circled, and I had nothing to shield her with, not even myself. Jake stayed. Nan too. But they couldn't fill the space Jenny left behind. No one could. I saw her in every dream. Every hallway. Every shattered moment I tried to piece together. I lost myself. And then came Celine. I hadn't seen her since Jenny died. She walked right past me on that rainy street like I was no one. Her eyes, once warm, were cold and blank. I wanted to call out. I didn't. She was my childhood friend, my first love. The girl I always dropped everything for, even if it meant leaving my wife waiting in the car, alone in a ballroom, crying in the dark. I'd put Celine first so many times. I thought I was being loyal. But I was betraying the woman who slept beside me every night and never said a word. Jenny never asked for much. Just time. Just presence. Just to feel seen. My mother used to say, if you were given the choice, you'd pick Celine. But you weren't. Jenny's your wife. And she needs your attention. I'm not neglecting Jenny, I told her. If she has a problem with my friendship with Celine, she can tell me herself. She won't, my mother snapped. That girl is as tight-lipped as a clam, and you'd know that if you ever paid attention. I didn't. I failed her. And the truth is, Jenny wasn't some arranged pawn. She wasn't a burden. She was kind. Soft in a world full of wolves. She tried to fit in, to understand me, to love me despite my distance. And I killed her with that distance. I loved her. I did. Maybe I didn't know how to show it. Maybe I thought I had time. But I see now, time is cruel. And love without action is just a story we tell ourselves to sleep at night. I sleep alone now. In a cramped apartment that smells like mildew and grief. I stare at her photo until my eyes blur. Her smile haunts me. If the gods are listening, if there's anything out there, I don't want money. I don't want power. I don't want redemption. I just want her. Let me go back. Give me one more chance to pick up that call, and I swear, this time, I'll come home. A pale glow bathed the cold hospital room. Machines beeped in steady rhythms, but the body on the bed remained motionless. The air smelled sterile, antiseptic, death, and something heavy that hung between the walls like an unfinished story. Mandy hovered near the bed, or at least, what remained of her did. She wasn't solid. She wasn't alive. She was just, here. She turned to the hooded figure standing beside her, its skeletal face unreadable. The Grim Reaper. It had greeted her the moment she stumbled out of her body, torn from the wreckage of her car, the glass and blood no longer her concern. So that's it, then? Mandy asked, voice wavering. I just, go? The Reaper didn't speak. It merely tilted its head toward the other side of the room. Mandy followed its gaze and saw another woman, brunette, delicate, with an IV in her arm and an oxygen mask beside her pillow. Unlike Mandy, she wasn't quite gone. Her spirit stood near her bed, arms crossed, staring at her body with deadened eyes. Who is she? Mandy whispered. Jenny Lancaster, the Reaper said, its voice like rustling leaves in a graveyard. She overdosed on sleeping pills. Mandy glanced at Jenny's still form, then at the Reaper. So you're here to take her, too? No, the Reaper's tone was final. It is not yet her time. Jenny let out a bitter laugh. Funny. I thought that was my choice. She turned to face the Reaper, her expression empty. I don't want to go back. There's nothing for me there. The word sent a shiver through Mandy. She had begged for life only moments ago, yet here was someone who had thrown it away. The Reaper's empty sockets fixated on Jenny. You are carrying a child. Jenny flinched. Her arms curled around her stomach. I didn't know, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But it doesn't change anything. I can't do this. I can't live like this. Mandy took a step forward, her ghostly form barely making a ripple in the air. But you can live. You should. Jenny turned to her, eyes dull. Why? What do I have to live for? A husband who doesn't love me? A marriage that was never real? A baby I never even knew about? Mandy clenched her fists. At least you have a body. At least you have a choice. The Reaper watched them in silence before speaking again. If you refuse to return, the child will die with you. Jenny inhaled sharply but didn't answer. Mandy felt a deep, hollow ache in her chest. She had fought for her life. She had screamed, pleaded, begged for another chance, but it had been ripped away in an instant. And now this woman had a chance but wanted to throw it away. She looked at the Reaper. Can't we trade? The Reaper turned its empty gaze toward her. Jenny blinked, startled. What? Mandy stepped closer. She doesn't want to go back. But I do. So let me take her place. Silence filled the room. Meanwhile at the other side of town. Mr. Lancaster? Morgan blinked. The voice seemed far away at first, muffled by a heavy fog, until it cut through with startling clarity. He looked up, startled, to see a board member halfway through a presentation, the projector casting slides across the polished walls of the Collin Corporation's main conference room. Sorry, Morgan said, straightening in his chair. Please continue. A few murmurs rippled around the table. Some glanced at each other in confusion, others simply returned to their notes. Morgan barely heard them. His heart was thundering in his chest, breath short as if he'd just surfaced from drowning. He was sitting at the head of the long table, Colin Corp's executive boardroom. Alive. Whole. Wearing a suit he hadn't worn in years. This isn't real. It couldn't be. The last thing he remembered was the crushing stillness of his small apartment. The smell of mold. The dim flicker of a failing light bulb. The weight of guilt pressing against his chest as he let out what he thought would be his last breath. But now, he was here. Morgan quickly reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. His hand trembled as he tapped the screen. April 2nd. The date hit him like a slap. The same day Jenny died. His eyes darted lower. A text notification sat there, blinking at him like an omen. Jake, she's at the hospital. Jenny overdosed. I'm heading there now. The blood drained from Morgan's face. No, he whispered. The chair scraped loudly against the polished floor as he stood up, earning startled glances from the board members. Mr. Lancaster, someone asked. But Morgan was already moving. He pushed the doors open and strode out, heart racing, panic swelling in his chest like a tidal wave. He didn't bother offering an excuse. There wasn't time. He bolted down the hallway, the sounds of his leather shoes echoing off the marble floors. Every step felt surreal, like he was moving through a dream, or a nightmare. But this time, he wasn't going to be too late. He wouldn't let her die again. Not this time. Not again. Back in the hospital. The Reaper pulled out a notebook and studied it for a long moment before speaking. He saw Morgan rushing towards a predetermined course. At last, the timeline corrects itself. The Grim Reaper said. What? A soul transfer is unnatural. But love and death often defy order. Mandy's chest tightened. But it's possible. Jenny Colin James Lancaster, the Reaper intoned, voice echoing with finality. Your husband comes. Do you choose life or death? I can't take this anymore. She said. The Grim Reaper then asked. Do you accept this exchange? Jenny hesitated for a second before she nodded with certainty. Yes. She turned towards Mandy, smiled and said. I hope my life is more kind to you than it was to me. The Reaper lifted a bony hand and pressed it against Jenny's forehead. Then you must grant her your memories. Jenny gasped as tendrils of light stretched from her and wrapped around Mandy. Images flooded Mandy's mind, memories of a lonely marriage, of a husband named Morgan who barely looked at his wife, of nights spent crying in a vast, empty house. The weight of Jenny's life sank into her chest, pressing against her like a leaden chain. And then, darkness. Mandy's spirit was pulled forward, sucked into the still warm body lying on the hospital bed. The last thing she heard before slipping into unconsciousness was the Reaper's voice, low and final. The bargain is sealed. Then the world went black. Chapter 2, Waking Up in Another Life. A steady beeping. The soft rustle of movement. A faint scent of antiseptic. Mandy's eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment, everything was a blur. The ceiling above her was white, too bright. Her body felt foreign, heavier, as if she were wading through thick fog. Then the memories hit her like a crashing wave. The Grim Reaper. The bargain. Jenny's body. Panic rose in her throat, but before she could react, a voice broke through the haze. You're awake, a man said. Mandy turned her head sluggishly. A tall, well-dressed man stood at the foot of her hospital bed. He had sharp features, neatly combed dark hair, and an air of practiced politeness. He wasn't her husband, but she knew him. Jake Hendricks. Jenny's memories whispered his name into Mandy's mind before she could even ask. Morgan's assistant. Loyal, competent, and, unlike Morgan, actually present. How are you feeling, Mrs. Lancaster? Jake asked, his gaze sharp, assessing. Mrs. Lancaster. The name didn't belong to her, but it did now. Mandy swallowed thickly, her throat dry. Her voice came out weaker than expected. She tried again. Where am I? The hospital. You overdosed, Jake said, watching her reaction carefully. He crossed his arms. Morgan will be here soon. He had a business meeting. A meeting. Of course he did. More of Jenny's memories trickled in, piecing themselves together like shards of a shattered mirror. Morgan Lancaster, her husband, wasn't the devoted, worried spouse waiting anxiously by her bedside. He was a man of convenience. Their marriage had been arranged, not by him, but by his late mother, who had picked Jenny for her clean reputation and high society background. Morgan had never loved her. Would never love her. Because in his heart, there was only one woman. Celine. Mandy's stomach twisted at the name. Celine was the untouchable love of Morgan's life, the one he visited under the guise of business trips, the one he looked at the way he had never looked at Jenny. And now, she was Jenny. Mrs. Lancaster? Jake prompted, his brow furrowing. Before Mandy could answer, the door opened, and a doctor walked in, glancing at the chart in his hands. He was middle-aged, wearing thin-rimmed glasses, with an expression that hovered somewhere between professional concern and clinical detachment. How are you feeling, Mrs. Lancaster? He asked, mirroring Jake's earlier question. Mandy hesitated. She had no idea how Jenny would have answered. What could she say? That she wasn't actually Jenny? That she had struck a deal with death itself? Instead, she did the only thing that made sense. She lied. I don't know, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor glanced up sharply. You don't know? Mandy shook her head. I don't remember. Jake stiffened. The doctor's expression turned serious. You don't remember the overdose? Or, he took a step closer. Do you know your name? Mandy opened her mouth, then stopped. She did know Jenny's name. She knew her past, her pain, the hollow shell of her marriage. But she didn't want it. So she gave the doctor a blank look and shook her head again. The silence in the room thickened. Jake cleared his throat. Doctor? The doctor sighed, scribbling something onto the chart. It's likely dissociative amnesia. It can happen after a traumatic event, especially with an overdose. The mind can suppress memories as a defense mechanism. He turned back to Mandy. It may be temporary. Or it may not be. We'll need further evaluation. Mandy swallowed, forcing herself to look as lost as possible. So. I don't remember anything? The doctor softened slightly. It's okay. We'll take it one step at a time. Jake, however, didn't seem convinced. He studied Mandy with narrowed eyes, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Mandy looked away, pretending not to notice. The doctor continued talking, something about neurological tests, therapy, observation. Mandy barely heard him. Her mind was still reeling from everything she had just absorbed. She had woken up in a life that wasn't hers, with a husband who didn't love her, wearing the name of a woman who had given up. And now, she had to pretend to be Jenny Lancaster. Indefinitely. Across the city. Morgan Lancaster's car screeched into the hospital driveway just as the sky turned a sickly shade of gray. He didn't wait for a valet. The door slammed behind him, and he was already halfway through the lobby by the time security looked up. He bypassed the nurse's station with a curt nod, his shoes echoing down the tiled corridor. Jake had told him she was stable, but nothing felt certain. The word overdose carried too many memories. Memories of a pale ultrasound screen, of blood, of silence. 6 years ago, Jenny had lost their first child. A miscarriage while he was overseas finalizing a crucial deal. She had never blamed him. Never raised her voice. But the light behind her eyes had never fully returned. Now, she was 4 weeks pregnant again. The timing of the overdose couldn't have been worse. The doctors hadn't said anything yet about the baby. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they were waiting to see. Morgan reached the door just as a doctor was exiting, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Reyes," Morgan said sharply. "How is she? How's the baby?" The doctor paused, recognizing him immediately. "Mr. Lancaster. She's stable for now. We're keeping her under observation, but," he lowered his voice, "there are complications." Morgan's jaw tightened. "The pregnancy?" "She's approximately 4 weeks along, according to her blood work," Dr. Reyes said, flipping through the chart. "Unfortunately, the amount of barbiturates in her system could affect embryonic development. At this stage, the fetus is especially vulnerable. The first trimester is critical, organ development is just beginning. We're worried about neurodevelopmental abnormalities, possible cardiac defects, or even early fetal demise." Morgan felt the words like a slap. "So, there's a chance she could lose the baby again?" Dr. Reyes nodded. "Yes. And even if the pregnancy continues, there's a risk of long-term complications. It's too soon to predict anything for certain, but we'll be running regular tests. Ultrasounds. Hormone levels. Right now, we're watching both of them closely." Morgan ran a hand down his face, trying to steady himself. "She doesn't even know she's pregnant." "She didn't mention it," the doctor confirmed. "If she's experiencing memory loss, as Jake suggested, it's possible she won't remember right away." Morgan stared at the door behind the doctor. "I can't lose her. Not again. Not them." Dr. Reyes softened slightly. "We're doing everything we can." Morgan gave a stiff nod, then opened the door. Inside, the room was still. The woman in the bed looked like Jenny, same delicate features, same soft brown hair, same graceful frame beneath the sterile white sheets, but her eyes had changed. She stared at him as if she had never seen him before. Morgan stepped closer, trying to ignore the tightness in his throat. "Jenny." She didn't answer. Her gaze remained fixed, guarded. Empty. He moved slowly, settling into the chair beside the bed. "It's okay. You're safe now. The doctors are taking care of you." No flicker of recognition. No tears. No relief. Just silence. Morgan glanced at the 4-line in her arm, the pale bruises on her wrist. His voice dropped, barely audible. "You scared the hell out of me." Still nothing. He cleared his throat, forcing a calmness he didn't feel. "Everything's going to be fine. We'll get through this, together." But the way she looked at him, detached, uncertain, told him otherwise. She didn't believe him. She didn't even know him. Inside the hospital room, Morgan sat beside the bed, one hand clenched on his lap, the other resting gently on the mattress. Jenny lay still, her chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. The doctor had said she was stable, but stability felt like a fragile promise. He looked up when the doctor re-entered, chart in hand, glasses low on his nose. "I need to know what she took," Morgan said quietly, firmly. The doctor nodded. "Barbiturates. A significant amount." Morgan's brow furrowed. "Who even prescribes those anymore?" "They're tightly regulated," the doctor said. "Rarely used outside of seizure treatment or severe insomnia." The bottle was labeled for a woman named Evelyn Mercado. Morgan's pulse quickened. "That's not Jenny." "No. She may have gotten them from someone she knew. A friend. Someone with an old prescription. People sometimes hold on to these meds for years. If she didn't want anyone to suspect, she wouldn't use her own name." Morgan fell silent. The pieces were coming together, and he hated the picture they formed. "Barbiturates in high doses can be fatal," the doctor continued. "She was lucky someone found her in time." "And the baby?" The doctor hesitated. "Too early to say. She's only 4 weeks along." But barbiturates cross the placenta. There's risk, developmental issues, abnormalities, even miscarriage. We'll have to monitor her closely. Morgan's chest tightened. So, she could lose the baby again. There's a chance, the doctor said evenly. I won't lie to you. The words hit like a punch. The grief Morgan thought he'd buried after their first loss came roaring back. He'd been so consumed with work, trying to salvage the company, he hadn't seen how much Jenny was still hurting. He rose slowly, eyes fixed on her face. I should have seen it, he whispered. I didn't. The doctor paused, then said gently, sometimes, they don't want to be seen. Morgan didn't answer. He just stood there, watching her breathe, as the doctor quietly stepped out of the room. The hospital room was quiet. Morgan had left for his business trip just hours earlier, leaving behind a half-drunk coffee and the silence that always followed him. Mandy sat upright in bed, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. She had combed through Jenny's memories that morning, dizzying flashes that hit her like sparks from a broken wire. The pills. The middle-aged woman at the pharmacy counter. A moment of distraction, just enough time for Jenny to swipe the bottle from the basket before the pharmacist returned. Jenny had been desperate. Quiet, grieving, but desperate. Mandy could feel the weight of it now. The loss of her parents, and then the baby. Alone in that cold apartment, rehearsing her smiles for Morgan, dying a little more each time he looked at her without really seeing her. That wasn't even the worst of it. It was the silence that followed. No one noticed the storm. Mandy knew what it did to a child. She had lived it. Her mother's addiction had stolen everything, food from the table, peace from the air, even the light from her little brother's eyes. And he'd paid the price. The seizures. The learning delays. The endless appointments they couldn't afford. Mandy had been 9 when she first lied to a doctor to get him help. And now, she was in Jenny's body. And Jenny was 4 weeks pregnant. With a baby who had already been exposed to enough trauma to last a lifetime. Dr. Reyes entered the room quietly. His presence was calm, even kind, but Mandy knew what he was here for. He closed the door behind him. I have the paperwork. Mandy looked up. Her voice was calm, but flat. Is it too early? It's early, yes, he replied. But that also makes the procedure safer. Less risk to you. He paused, watching her face carefully. You're sure? I am. Mandy didn't flinch. But she didn't feel brave either. She just felt tired. And determined. He nodded, then lowered his voice. Does your husband know? Jenny replied. If anyone asks, just say the pregnancy didn't survive the overdose. Jake's eyes widened. He didn't stay to hear more. Heart pounding, he pulled out his phone. 2 hours later, a call in transit. Morgan stared out the tinted window of the car, one hand gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. She's terminating it, he asked, his voice low and incredulous. Yes, sir, Jake said from the other end. Today. Morgan clenched his jaw. Put me through to Dr. Reyes. Now. 10 minutes later. Dr. Reyes picked up the hospital line, his tone calm and professional. Mr. Lancaster. I'm asking, no, I'm begging you, to delay the procedure, Morgan said tightly. I just need a few days. Don't go through with it until I talk to her. A long pause. Then, she has the right to choose. I know that, Morgan said. But she's not in the right state of mind. Just wait. Please. 3 days later, late evening. Morgan entered the hospital room with a presence like a storm about to break. Jenny sat in bed, dressed in pale blue hospital scrubs. She didn't look surprised to see him. Her eyes, heavy-lidded and shadowed with exhaustion, followed him as he closed the door. His voice trembled, barely restrained. What were you thinking? She didn't answer. I heard everything, he said. Jake called me. I spoke to Dr. Reyes. Why would you want to abort our child? Jenny lifted her chin, her voice calm and cold. Because I've done the research. Because I've spoken to the doctor. Do you know what that overdose could have done to the baby? Morgan blinked. Even if there's no sign of damage now, she continued, our child could still suffer, heart problems, seizures, learning delays. The kind that don't show until it's too late. I wouldn't just be giving birth. I'd be giving a life sentence. Silence pressed against the walls. I tried to die, Morgan, she said quietly. And in doing that, I may have ruined an innocent life. I won't carry that burden. I won't bring a child into this world just to watch it suffer because of me. Morgan stood frozen, like her words had pierced through his ribs. You really meant to, he trailed off, voice unsteady. You really wanted to die? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Something in Morgan broke. Then let me fix this, he whispered. I'll get the best doctors, specialists from Zurich, New York, wherever. We'll monitor everything. If there's even the smallest chance the baby can be born healthy. And then what? Jenny cut in. We raise a child in a house where the parents don't even love each other? Her eyes were hard now. Glinting. Don't act like you're here because of the baby. You weren't here when I needed you. You've been with her. Morgan stepped back, stunned. Celine? Again with that? I have eyes and ears. Don't treat me like a fool. Her voice was low and dangerous. I've told you 100 times, he said, almost shouting. Celine is just a friend. She's helped with the business. That's all. Jenny gave a cold, humorless laugh. Then why does she act like she owns you? Why does she speak like you're already hers? Morgan opened his mouth, then closed it again. He had no answer that would satisfy her. A long silence passed between them. Finally, Morgan exhaled slowly. I don't care what you think about me. But I'm not letting you make this decision alone. This is my child too. In the end, Morgan got his way. Jenny didn't terminate the pregnancy. But as she lay in bed that night, her hand on her stomach, she didn't feel victory or defeat. Her eyes, heavy-lidded and calm, didn't meet his. She was already somewhere he couldn't reach. Only dread. And the quiet ticking of a future neither of them was ready for. Chapter 3, A New Life, A New Perspective. A few weeks later. Mandy stepped out of the sleek black car and stared up at the grand estate in front of her. The Lancaster mansion was nothing short of breathtaking, a towering structure of glass and marble, with sprawling gardens and a driveway long enough to fit a fleet of cars. Her new home. She barely had time to process it before a team of uniformed staff rushed forward to greet her. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but their eyes held something else, curiosity. Mandy could feel it immediately. They're studying me. They had known Jenny Lancaster before. And Jenny Lancaster, as Mandy was quickly realizing from her memories, had been nothing like her. A stoic woman with hollow eyes, a wife who floated through her own home like a ghost long before she actually tried to become one. Mandy, however, wasn't used to silence. Or submission. She took a step inside, and the first thing she noticed was the sheer grandeur of it all. The chandeliers, the pristine furniture, the massive windows that overlooked an immaculate garden. This was wealth on a scale she had never experienced. And yet, the house felt cold. The staff lingered, watching her carefully, waiting for something. Ma'am, would you like tea? One of the maids asked hesitantly. Jenny smiled, catching the maid completely off guard. Sure. That sounds great. The woman blinked. The other staff exchanged glances. Jenny Lancaster never smiled at them. She never chatted. She would have barely acknowledged their presence before retreating to her room. Of course, ma'am, the maid stammered before hurrying off. Mandy turned back to the grand hallway, taking everything in. Jenny had chosen death over this? Over a life of luxury, with a powerful CEO husband and servants at her beck and call? It didn't make sense. Until the memories surfaced again. The loneliness. The neglect. The misery. Money couldn't buy love, and in this house, there was none. The staff takes notice. As the evening stretched on, the changes in Jenny's behavior became more obvious. Mandy wandered through the mansion, actually exploring instead of locking herself away in her bedroom like Jenny used to. She asked questions, complimented the decor, and even made small talk with the staff. And the staff noticed. I swear, she was never like this before, a butler murmured in the kitchen. Maybe the amnesia changed her, another whispered back. She's acting like a completely different person. Upstairs, Nan, the housekeeper and Morgan's former nanny, watched her closely. Mandy could feel the older woman's sharp gaze trailing her every move, filled with suspicion and something else. Hope. Perhaps Nan had been waiting for Jenny to change. When Mandy finally settled into Jenny's room, a luxurious yet impersonal space, Nan stepped inside with a gentle knock. You should rest, dear. The doctor said your pregnancy is delicate now. Mandy stiffened. The baby. It was another truth she was still struggling to process. Jenny had been pregnant before but lost the child in a miscarriage. And Morgan, he hadn't been there. Nan sighed, stepping closer. We barely managed to save this baby, you know. The overdose nearly took both of you. Mandy swallowed. She had been so caught up in adjusting to this new life that she had barely considered the fragile life growing inside her. Nan's voice softened. Maybe this is a second chance, Mandy didn't answer. She wasn't sure she could. Morgan's return. That night, Morgan Lancaster finally returned home. Mandy had been expecting someone cold, detached. And she wasn't entirely wrong. Morgan was tall, dark-haired, and devastatingly handsome, the kind of man who commanded attention with his presence alone. But his expression when he saw her wasn't one of relief or concern. It was hesitation. Jenny, he said, stopping just short of the threshold. Mandy tilted her head, watching him the way he was watching her. So, this is the man you gave your life for? She could see why Jenny had fallen for him. He was powerful, charming in a distant sort of way. But he was also a stranger, even to his own wife. Welcome home, Mandy said. Morgan blinked. Welcome home? That wasn't something Jenny would have ever said. You seem different. His voice was cautious. Mandy just smiled. Amnesia, remember? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair, clearly thrown off by her tone. Before he could respond, Nan appeared behind him, arms crossed. Be thankful your wife is still here, Morgan, she said, her voice edged with quiet reprimand. Morgan stiffened. Nan. She could have died, the older woman interrupted. And don't forget what the doctor said. Stress could lead to another miscarriage. Morgan's jaw tightened. He glanced at Mandy. There was something almost guilty in his expression, but he quickly masked it. I know that. Do you? Nan's voice was sharp. Because you weren't here last time, either. Mandy watched as Morgan's posture stiffened. Nan wasn't just a housekeeper, she had raised him. That gave her the right to speak to him like this, even if he didn't like it. I was handling business, Morgan said, voice clipped. Nan shook her head. And what's your excuse this time? His phone rang before he could answer. Mandy didn't need to see the name on the screen to know who it was. Celine. Nan sighed, rubbing her temples. Morgan, you should be prioritizing your wife, not your friend. Morgan's grip tightened around his phone. Celine is just a friend. Nan leveled him with a look. Then clarify that to everyone, including your wife. Because right now, high society thinks Celine is your real wife. And Jenny? Just an obligation. The room fell silent. Morgan clenched his jaw, then turned toward Mandy. Get some rest. His tone was firm but distant. Then, without another word, he left the room, answering the call as he did. Mandy watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. So this was her new life. Jenny had loved a man who had never loved her back. And now Mandy was the one living in her place. One thing was certain, if Morgan thought she was going to live the rest of her life as a silent, suffering wife like Jenny had, he was dead wrong. Mandy was amazed when she walked into Jenny's closet. It was filled with designer clothes, handbags neatly lined on glass shelves, rows of heels and flats organized by color and season, and velvet drawers holding jewelry that probably cost more than anything she'd ever touched in her life. For a moment, she let herself imagine it, living like this. If she had to wear Jenny's face for the rest of her life, at least she'd have this: luxury, comfort, respect. Maybe that was enough. She changed into a white silk nightgown and lay on the massive four-poster bed, her fingers brushing against the cool linen sheets. The mattress was so large, it was easy to forget another person would be sleeping beside her. Morgan entered the room a few minutes later, loosening his tie, saying nothing. He headed straight for the bathroom. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyes following him. "Isn't it obvious?" he said, voice low and clipped. "I'm going to wash up and go to sleep." The sound of running water filled the silence between them. Later, long after the lights had been turned off and the room slipped into stillness, Morgan stirred in his sleep, woken by a sound he didn't immediately recognize. Crying. He turned toward her and flicked on the lamp. Mandy was sitting upright, her body trembling. Her eyes were open, wide and glassy, fixed on some point past him. Tears streamed down her face, but she wasn't blinking. She didn't even seem to see him. "Jenny?" Morgan sat up straighter, confused. "Jenny, what the hell?" She let out a gasp, almost like a sob, but she didn't move. She didn't respond to his voice. Her breath hitched, her whole body shaking. Morgan reached for her shoulder. "Hey. Wake up." The second he touched her, she lurched back like she'd been burned, eyes still wide, now wild with confusion. She let out a guttural, terrified noise, flailing as if trying to escape something only she could see. "Jenny," he said sharply, both hands on her arms now. "It's me. It's Morgan. You're okay." She blinked rapidly, the fog clearing slowly from her eyes. For a second, she looked like she might scream. Then her breathing slowed. What happened?" she whispered. "You tell me," Morgan said, still stunned. "You were crying, sobbing. You wouldn't respond. Then you freaked out when I touched you." Mandy stared at him, confused. I don't remember." He frowned. "At all?" "No," she said quietly. "I was asleep." Morgan leaned back, clearly shaken. It must have been a nightmare. Mandy shook her head, still trying to piece things together. But the fragments were gone. All she knew was the pounding in her chest and the sweat clinging to her back. Morgan eventually lay back down. He didn't say anything else. But Mandy couldn't sleep again, not that night. She stared at the ceiling, wide awake, wondering what else lay buried in Jenny's mind, and how much longer it would be before it all surfaced. The next morning. The light poured in softly through the tall windows, brushing pale gold over the bedspread. Mandy had barely slept. She sat upright, legs pulled close, watching the steam rise from a cup of untouched tea a nurse had left on her bedside table. Morgan was already up, standing near the window with a phone to his ear. He ended the call without a word, then turned to face her. His face was unreadable, but the tension sat thick in the room like fog. "You've never done that before," he said. Mandy blinked. "What?" "Whatever happened last night. You were crying in your sleep. Eyes wide open. You wouldn't wake up." He paused, voice tight. "I've shared a bed with you for years, Jenny. I'd know." Mandy didn't speak. He moved closer, setting his phone down. "What's going on with you?" I don't remember any of it, she said flatly. You said it was just a dream. I thought it was at first. But it wasn't. He lowered his voice. You were sobbing. Whispering things I couldn't make out. You looked, God, Jenny, you looked like you were seeing something I couldn't. She swallowed hard. Morgan's eyes searched her face. Was it about the baby? Jenny shook her head slowly. I don't know. You've never had night terrors before, he said, more to himself than to her. Not once. I guess people change, she said, tone cool and evasive. Morgan stared at her for a moment, and something in his eyes flickered, doubt, or maybe suspicion. But then he masked it with a sigh and turned away. I'm calling Dr. Reyes, he said. You need to be evaluated. Jenny's voice sharpened. I said I'm fine. You don't look fine. And I'm not just going to pretend last night didn't happen. A beat passed. She stared at his back. Why now? He asked softly, still not turning around. Why is this just starting? After everything that's happened? She didn't answer. Because the real Jenny never had night terrors. But Mandy did. And now, she was slipping through the cracks. Later that morning, Morgan leaned against the glass railing of his home office, phone pressed to his ear as he stared blankly at the garden below. She was crying, he said quietly. Eyes open. I couldn't wake her at first, and when I did, she didn't remember a thing. Dr. Reyes's voice came through the line, calm but concerned. It sounds like a classic night terror. They're rare in adults, but not impossible, especially following trauma or major emotional distress. So what do I do? Wake her up next time? Not immediately, Dr. Reyes warned. Waking someone in the middle of a night terror can sometimes trigger a violent reaction. The best thing to do is keep her safe, make sure she doesn't hurt herself. If it happens again, bring her to the hospital. We can arrange for a sleep study. Morgan rubbed his forehead. She's never had anything like this before. It started after the overdose. I wouldn't rule out neurological impact or repressed trauma resurfacing. Either way, we should monitor it. These episodes may get worse. Morgan hung up with a quiet thank you just as Jake walked into the office holding a stack of documents. She okay? Jake asked. Morgan didn't answer right away. Jake looked toward the hallway, brow furrowing. She looked off this morning. Morgan looked up sharply. Off how? Jake hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Pale. Tired. Just, not like herself. But I figured maybe she hadn't slept. Morgan's jaw tightened. She didn't. At home. After the two men left for work, the Lancaster household fell into its usual rhythm of quiet order. But something about the stillness felt different that day. Jenny, or rather, Mandy, curled up on one of the antique tufted sofas in the living room, still wearing the same silk robe she had barely touched since morning. Her eyes were heavy. Her body ached with exhaustion. She didn't fight it when her head dropped to the side and sleep overtook her. Nan walked by with a folded linen napkin in hand and paused. She'll hurt her back sleeping like that. One of the younger housemaids leaned in. Should we move her to her room? Nan hesitated, glancing at the woman asleep on the couch. Mr. Lancaster said she didn't sleep at all last night. Let her rest. So they left her alone. At first, the silence was peaceful. But then came the sound. Soft, muffled crying. Sharp, broken breaths. The staff peeked in from the hallway. Jenny was curled tightly on the sofa in a fetal position, her arms wrapped around herself, her lips moving in a whisper no one could understand. Her eyes were open, glassy, unfocused, staring into nothing, while tears streamed silently down her cheeks. What in the world? One of the maids whispered. Is she sleepwalking? She's crying. But she's not blinking. I think she's having some kind of episode, another murmured. Should we call Mr. Lancaster? We can't. He's in a meeting, Nan said, stepping forward. I'll wake her. She moved closer, her hand trembling just a little as she reached out and gently touched Jenny's shoulder. Ma'am. Suddenly, Jenny snapped upright, gasping like someone breaking the surface of dark water. Her arms swung out violently in defense, shoving Nan back with a surprising force. One of the maids screamed. Jenny's eyes darted around the room, wild and panicked, her chest heaving as if she couldn't breathe. It took a full 30 seconds for her to realize where she was, and that she wasn't in danger. Nan steadied herself, heart pounding. It's okay, dear. You're home. It's all right. Jenny blinked rapidly, her gaze finally focusing on the faces in front of her. Her lips parted, but no words came. The room was silent, everyone frozen, watching her like she might break. And for a moment, Mandy felt like she might.